There are some phone calls you remember forever, not because they last a long time, but because they divide your life into two parts: everything before the call and everything after it. For me, that call came on a quiet Tuesday morning. I was standing in my design studio, helping a young couple choose colors for their new home. Sunlight poured through the large front windows, and soft music played in the background. It felt like an ordinary day. Then my phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed across the screen. Normally, I ignored unknown calls while I was working. That morning, something told me to answer. "Hello, this is Emily Carter," a calm, professional voice replied. "Good morning, Ms. Carter. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm calling from First National Bank regarding the property located at 148 Willow Creek Road." I smiled politely. "I think you've reached the wrong person." "I'm sorry?" "My mother owns that property." There was a brief pause. Then Sarah spoke more carefully. "Yes, Ms. Carter. That's exactly why I'm calling. Our records indicate the property was sold yesterday." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was impossible. My mother would never sell her house. She and my late father built it together. Sarah remained silent for a moment before saying something that made my knees feel weak. "According to the closing documents, your brother, Ryan Carter, completed the transaction." The world around me seemed to disappear. The music inside the studio faded. The voices of my clients became distant. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. "That's impossible," I whispered. "My brother can't sell a house that isn't his." "I sincerely hope there's been a misunderstanding," Sarah replied. "But I noticed something unusual in the ownership documents, and before the funds are fully released, I wanted to confirm a few details." "What kind of details?" "I think it's best if we discuss them in person." "When can you come to the bank?" I looked at the clock. It was 10:21 a.m. "I'll be there within the hour." As soon as the call ended, I stood completely still. My hands were trembling. Ryan? Selling Mom's house? No. There had to be a mistake. Because if there was one thing my father loved more than anything, it was that house. And Ryan knew it better than anyone. My father, Thomas Carter, wasn't a rich man. He never drove expensive cars. He never wore expensive watches. He believed wealth wasn't measured by what you owned. It was measured by what you built. When he was 28 years old, he bought a small piece of land on Willow Creek Road. There was nothing there except grass, wildflowers, and a few old oak trees. Most people would have hired a construction company. Dad couldn't afford that. So every evening after finishing his regular job as a carpenter, he returned to that empty land with a toolbox and a dream. For nearly 3 years, he built our home with his own hands, brick by brick, board by board, window by window. When neighbors offered to help, he always thanked them, but he insisted on doing as much as he could himself. "This house isn't just for us," he'd say. "It's for the generations that come after us." Growing up there felt magical. Dad planted 2 oak trees in the front yard, one when Ryan was born, the other when I arrived 5 years later. He called them my 2 greatest achievements. Every birthday, Mom measured our height against the kitchen doorway. Every Christmas, Dad climbed onto the roof to hang lights, while Ryan and I argued over who got to place the star on top of the tree. Every Sunday afternoon, we ate lunch together on the back porch. No matter how busy life became, we always came home. That's why when Dad became sick, losing him felt impossible. At first, it was only small things. He became tired more easily. He forgot where he left his tools. Then came the hospital visits, the tests, the diagnosis. Advanced heart failure. The doctors did everything they could. Dad fought with every ounce of strength he had. But one evening, while Ryan and I sat beside his hospital bed, he asked us to come closer. "I need both of you to promise me something." Ryan immediately reached for his hand. "Anything, Dad." Dad smiled weakly. "Take care of your mother." We both nodded. Then he looked toward the window before speaking again. "And don't ever let anyone take this house away from her." His voice was barely above a whisper. "This home is where your mother feels closest to me. As long as she has these walls, She'll never be alone. Ryan wiped away a tear. I promise. So do I said. Dad smiled one last time. 3 days later, he was gone. For weeks, Mom barely spoke. She wandered through the house holding one of Dad's old flannel shirts. Sometimes she'd sit in his workshop for hours without saying a word. Ryan stepped in to help with everything. He handled the funeral arrangements. He met with the insurance company. He spoke with Dad's lawyer. Whenever I offered to help, he smiled. Don't worry, Em. I've got everything under control. I believed him. Mom believed him. Looking back, trusting Ryan so completely was the biggest mistake we ever made. Because while we were grieving, he was quietly putting a plan into motion that would destroy everything Dad had worked his entire life to build. And I wouldn't discover just how far he had gone until I pulled into my mother's driveway later that morning and saw something that made my blood run cold. A large white sign stood in the middle of the front yard. It had only one word written across it: sold. I slammed on the brakes so hard that my tires screeched against the pavement. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. I simply stared through the windshield. The white sign stood in the middle of the front yard like it had every right to be there. Sold. One single word. One word that erased 36 years of memories. One word that told me someone had decided my mother's future without ever asking her. My heart raced as I jumped out of the car. This can't be happening, I whispered to myself. I hurried toward the house. Everything looked normal. The flower beds Mom cared for every spring were blooming. Dad's old wind chimes still hung beside the porch. The porch swing he built with his own hands gently rocked in the breeze. Nothing had changed, except everything had. I pushed open the front gate and almost ran to the front door. Before I could knock, Mom opened it. Her face immediately brightened. Emily! What a wonderful surprise. She wrapped me in a warm hug. Then she stepped back and looked at me carefully. Honey, you look pale. Is everything all right? I tried to answer, but the words refused to come out. Instead, I looked past her toward the living room. Dad's favorite chair was still beside the fireplace. His reading glasses still rested on the small wooden table. The family photos still covered the walls. It looked exactly the way it had the day he passed away. Mom followed my eyes. What is it? I took a deep breath. Mom, I need to ask you something. She nodded. Of course. Did you? I struggled to finish the sentence. Did you sell the house? Her smile disappeared instantly. What? The house. Did you sign any papers recently? She looked genuinely confused. No. Why would I? This is my home. I promised your father I'd stay here. I slowly pointed toward the front window. Mom walked over and pulled the curtain aside. The moment she saw the sign, her entire body froze. No, she whispered. No. There has to be some mistake. She rushed outside before I could stop her. She stood in front of the sign with trembling hands. She reached out and touched it as if expecting it to disappear. I've never seen this before. She turned toward me. I swear, Emily, I didn't sell our home. I know you didn't. I answered without hesitation, because I believed her, completely. Just then, a black SUV slowly pulled into the driveway. Ryan climbed out. The moment he saw us standing beside the sign, his confident smile faded, only for a second. Then he forced another one. Hey, what are you two doing outside? Mom pointed at the sign. Ryan, what is this? He sighed heavily. I was hoping we could talk inside. No. Mom's voice was firm. We'll talk right here. Ryan glanced at me, then back at Mom. I didn't want you to find out like this. My stomach tightened. Find out what? Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. I sold the house. Silence. Complete silence. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Mom stared at him. You? You what? I sold it. Her eyes filled with tears. You sold my house? Ryan quickly raised his hands. Please let me explain. What explanation could possibly make this all right? I demanded. Ryan took a deep breath. I needed money. Mom looked completely lost. For what? Ryan looked away. My business. I frowned. What business? You told us everything was going well. It was... until 6 months ago. What happened? I made some bad investments. How bad? He didn't answer. Instead, he quietly said, I owed more than I could repay. My heart sank. So you decided to sell Mom's house? I was going to buy it back. When? As soon as my business recovered. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You gambled with our mother's home? It wasn't gambling. I had a plan. Mom shook her head. No. Your father trusted you. Ryan lowered his eyes. I know. He made you promise. I know. And you still did this? Ryan couldn't answer. Before anyone spoke again, another vehicle entered the driveway. This one was a silver sedan. A man in a navy blue suit stepped out carrying a leather folder. He smiled politely as he approached us. Good afternoon. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm representing Willow Creek Property Investments. Ryan's face turned pale. Robert looked at his paperwork. I apologize for arriving early. I'm here to complete tomorrow's final possession inspection. Mom looked at him in disbelief. Possession? Yes, ma'am. Our company officially takes ownership of the property tomorrow morning. Mom's legs nearly gave way. I caught her before she fell. Robert immediately realized something was terribly wrong. He looked at Ryan. Mr. Carter, has your family not been informed? Ryan remained silent. Robert slowly closed his folder. I think I should probably contact our legal department. He stepped away to make a phone call. Mom clung to my arm. They're taking my house, she whispered. They're really taking it. I looked straight at Ryan. No. They're not. He frowned. Emily, the contracts are signed. The money has already been approved. It's over. I took one slow step toward him. You know what Dad always told us? Ryan didn't answer. I continued anyway. He said the truth has a way of finding people. Ryan forced a weak smile. This isn't about truth. It's about money. I shook my head. No. It's about betrayal. Then my phone vibrated. It was Sarah Mitchell, the bank manager. I answered immediately. Emily? I've just found something in the mortgage file. Her voice sounded urgent. You need to come to the bank right now. What did you find? There was a brief pause. Then she quietly said, I don't believe your brother had the legal authority to complete this sale. Everything changed in that moment. For the first time since that morning, I realized we still had a chance to save my mother's home. I followed Sarah Mitchell into a small conference room overlooking the bank's parking lot. She closed the door behind us and placed a thick file on the table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she slid the file toward me. Ms. Carter, she said softly, I've worked in banking for over 20 years. I've reviewed thousands of property transactions. And something about your family's file didn't feel right. I looked at the stack of documents. What's wrong with it? She opened the file to the first page. This is the sales agreement your brother signed. I quickly scanned the document. Ryan Carter. His signature was everywhere. Every required page, every disclosure, every approval. At first glance, everything appeared perfectly legal. So why did you call me? Sarah turned another page. Because this house wasn't owned only by your mother. I frowned. What do you mean? When your father passed away, ownership didn't automatically transfer to Mrs. Carter. She pointed to a highlighted paragraph. According to the county records, your father and mother owned the property jointly. I nodded. That's correct. When your father died, his ownership interest became part of his estate. I stared at her. I don't understand. She folded her hands. Before the property could legally be sold, the estate had to be settled exactly as required by law. And according to the documents we received, that process may never have been completed. A chill ran through my body. So Ryan wasn't allowed to sell it? I'm saying there are serious questions about whether he had the authority. She reached for another folder. This is what concerned me even more. She placed a copy of a legal declaration in front of me. My eyes immediately landed on one sentence. All interested family members have been informed and have no objection to the sale. I looked up. I've never seen this document. Sarah nodded. I suspected that. I certainly never signed anything. I know. My heart started pounding. If I wasn't informed, then who said I was? Sarah quietly slid another page across the table. I believe someone answered that question for you. At the bottom of the declaration, someone had written my name, Emily Carter. Beside it was a signature. I froze. That wasn't my handwriting, not even close. The letters were uneven. The way the E was written was completely different from mine. Whoever had signed it had only seen my signature once or twice. They had copied it badly. I slowly looked at Sarah. That's not mine. I didn't think it was. You knew? I couldn't prove it. But something felt wrong. I leaned back in my chair. My own brother had signed my name. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Sarah gently broke the silence. There's another problem. There is? She opened another document. This sale moved unusually fast. How fast? The property was listed, negotiated, inspected, and closed in less than 3 weeks. I stared at her. Is that unusual? For a family home of this value? Very. She pointed to several dates. Normally, these transactions take much longer. So why was this one rushed? I don't know. But someone wanted the deal completed before questions could be asked. A knock interrupted us. The door opened. A man in his early 60s stepped inside carrying a briefcase. Gray hair, dark blue suit, calm expression. Sarah stood. Mr. Lawson. He nodded politely, then looked at me. You must be Emily. I stood up. Yes. He extended his hand. My name is David Lawson. I was your father's attorney. I recognized the name immediately. Dad had trusted him for years. Mr. Lawson sat beside me. I'm very sorry we have to meet under these circumstances. So am I. He opened his briefcase. I received a call from Sarah an hour ago. She explained what happened. I looked at him hopefully. Can you stop the sale? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he removed a worn leather folder. I first need to ask you something. Anything. Did your father ever mention changing his estate plan before he passed away? I shook my head. No. He simply asked Ryan and me to protect Mom and the house, Mr. Lawson nodded slowly. That's exactly what I expected. He opened the folder. Inside was a copy of my father's estate documents. I prepared these 6 years ago. He carefully turned several pages, then stopped. This, he said quietly, is the document Ryan never expected anyone to read. I leaned closer. What is it? Mr. Lawson looked directly into my eyes. It's a legal restriction your father personally requested. A restriction? He loved that house more than any possession he ever owned. So he added a special clause. My heart began racing. What kind of clause? Before he could answer, his phone rang. He checked the screen. His expression immediately changed. It's the county recorder's office. He answered. David Lawson speaking. For nearly a minute, he listened without saying a word. Then he slowly stood. I understand. We'll be there immediately. He ended the call. What happened? Mr. Lawson looked at Sarah, then back at me. The Property Records Office has just discovered another document connected to your father's house. What document? He took a slow breath. They believe someone tried to remove it from the official file shortly before the sale. I felt my heart sink. Who? Mr. Lawson slowly closed the folder. I think. We're about to find out. David Lawson slipped his phone back into his pocket and looked directly at me. Emily. We need to leave immediately. I stood up so quickly that my chair slid backward across the floor. What did the county recorder's office find? They wouldn't discuss the details over the phone. They only said the document is original, it belongs to your father's property file, and someone recently tried to remove it from their records. My heart skipped a beat. Remove it? David nodded. Fortunately, government property records are backed up both physically and digitally. If someone removes one copy, they rarely remove every copy. Sarah closed the file on the table. I'll notify our legal department that the transaction is now under review. Until this is resolved, I'll recommend that the bank delay releasing the remaining loan funds. I looked at her hopefully. Can they still stop it? She answered honestly. I don't know. But every hour we gain improves your chances. For the first time all day, I felt a small spark of hope. Less than 30 minutes later, David and I walked into the county recorder's office. An older woman wearing reading glasses greeted us from behind the front desk. Mr. Lawson? Yes. I'm Helen Brooks. I'm the senior records supervisor. She looked at me kindly. You must be Emily Carter. I nodded. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. She picked up a thick folder. Please come with me. Helen led us into a secure archive room lined with thousands of property files. She stopped in front of a large table. Lying on top was my family's property record. A bright red sticker had been placed across the front. Review required. What happened? David asked. Helen carefully opened the file. Yesterday afternoon, one of our employees noticed something unusual. She pointed to a checklist attached to the inside cover. Someone requested access to this property file last week. That's normal. But when the file was returned, one document was missing. I frowned. Missing? Helen nodded. Our staff member thought it had simply been misfiled. So she checked the digital archive. She clicked a few keys on her computer. Seconds later, a scanned document appeared on the screen. David leaned forward. The moment he saw it, his eyes widened. I can't believe it. What is it? I asked. He turned the monitor toward me. At the top of the page were the words, Declaration of Restricted Property Transfer. Below it, I saw my father's signature. My hands immediately began to shake. This was signed 5 years ago, David explained. I prepared it personally. Helen nodded. It was officially recorded with the county. I looked at the first paragraph. My father had written that if he passed away before my mother, the family home could not be sold while she was alive unless she personally approved the sale in writing before 2 independent witnesses. I stared at the page. Mom had never signed anything. David looked at me. Without your mother's written approval, this sale should never have happened. I could hardly breathe. So Ryan knew. I believe he did. Then why would he try it anyway? David slowly turned another page. Because he believed no one would find this. Helen spoke quietly. Unfortunately, there's something else. My stomach tightened. What now? She handed us a visitor log. Every person who views an archived property file signs in. I looked at the final entry. Date, time, name, Ryan Carter. I closed my eyes. He came here. Helen nodded. 3 days before the property closed. David sighed heavily. So he knew exactly where this document was kept. Helen pointed to another line. After he left, our employee discovered the document was missing. David looked at me. I don't think that's a coincidence. Neither did I. For the first time, I wasn't looking at a desperate brother who had made a terrible mistake. I was looking at someone who had carefully planned every step, someone who knew exactly what he was doing, someone who believed he could erase my father's final protection with a single stolen document. As we were leaving the archive room, David's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed the name of the investment company's attorney. David answered on speaker. "This is David Lawson." A firm voice replied. "Mr. Lawson, this is Karen Whitmore, legal counsel for Willow Creek Property Investments. We've just been informed that the bank has paused the release of funds. Is there a problem?" David looked at me before answering. "Yes. There appears to be a serious legal issue regarding the authority to sell the Carter property." There was a long silence. Then Karen quietly said something none of us expected. "If that's true, my clients have a much bigger problem." David frowned. "What do you mean?" Karen sighed. "My clients have already started demolition planning." My heart stopped. Demolition? Yes. The existing house was scheduled to be demolished next week. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. The home my father had spent 3 years building, the home where every family memory lived, the home my mother still believed she would grow old in, was only days away from being reduced to rubble. David's face hardened. "Cancel every contractor." "Immediately," Karen answered honestly. "I can request it. But unless a court issues an emergency order before tomorrow morning, my clients legally own the property." The call ended. No one spoke. Finally, David turned toward me. "Emily, if we're going to save your father's house, we have less than 24 hours. Less than 24 hours. That was all we had. Less than 24 hours before the home my father had built with his own hands could be torn down forever. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then David Lawson closed the property file with a determined look. "We're not giving up." He turned to Helen Brooks. "I'll need certified copies of every document in this file." Helen nodded immediately. "I'll prepare them right away." "What about the original?" "It never leaves this building." David smiled. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." Within 15 minutes, we left the county recorder's office carrying a folder full of certified copies. As soon as we reached the parking lot, David stopped walking. "Emily, there's one more place we need to go." "Where?" "The courthouse. We're asking a judge for an emergency order to stop the transfer." By the time we reached the courthouse, it was nearly 4 o'clock in the afternoon. David moved quickly through the security checkpoint as if he had done it hundreds of times. Maybe he had. Inside, he handed the court clerk a stack of documents. "We're requesting an emergency injunction." The clerk reviewed the paperwork. "This concerns the Carter property?" "Yes." She disappeared into a back office. Every minute felt like an hour. I couldn't stop thinking about Mom. She was still sitting in the house Dad had built, completely unaware that tomorrow morning strangers planned to take it away. After almost 30 minutes, the clerk returned. "The judge will hear your request today." Relief washed over me. Maybe, just maybe, we still had a chance. The hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. David calmly explained everything: the forged signature, the missing county document, the restriction Dad had placed on the property. The judge listened carefully. Then he adjusted his glasses and looked directly at David. "Counselor, have you informed the buyers about these issues?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And the bank?" "They've temporarily suspended the final release of funds." The judge nodded thoughtfully. Finally, he signed the order in front of us. "The court grants a temporary injunction. No demolition. No transfer of possession. Not until ownership is legally determined." I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. The house was safe, at least for now. When we arrived back at Mom's house, the sun was beginning to set. Mom opened the front door before I even knocked. The moment she saw my face, she searched my eyes for an answer. "Emily?" I smiled for the first time all day. "They can't take the house tomorrow." Tears immediately filled her eyes. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Thank God. I've been praying all afternoon. Ryan was sitting alone in Dad's old workshop. The lights were off. Only the setting sun came through the window. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked up. So, you stopped it? For now. He nodded slowly. I figured you would. I crossed my arms. Why, Ryan? He stared at the floor. I already told you. I needed money. No. You needed millions. What happened? Ryan covered his face with both hands. For the first time, he looked completely broken. My company failed. I lost everything. Investors. Clients. My savings. I kept borrowing money because I believed I could recover. But every month, I sank deeper. How much? He whispered the answer. $2.8 million. I couldn't believe it. 2.8 million? He nodded. The lenders gave me one final deadline. If I didn't pay, they were going to bankrupt me. So you decided to sell Mom's house? I thought I could buy it back before anyone found out. You forged my signature. I know. You lied to Mom. I know. You broke the promise you made to Dad. Ryan closed his eyes. I know. His voice cracked. I know every single thing I destroyed. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered Mom standing in the front yard, staring at that sold sign with tears in her eyes. No amount of debt could justify that. The next morning, David called before sunrise. Emily, I've just received new information. What happened? The investment company investigated Ryan's disclosures. And? They've discovered he failed to tell them about your father's legal restriction. So? They're considering legal action against Ryan. I remained silent. David continued. But that's not why I called. What is it? He paused. Last night, your father left something for me. I frowned. What do you mean? I found a sealed envelope inside his estate file. It was addressed to me. And written across the front were the words, "Open only if someone ever tries to sell our family home against Margaret's wishes." I felt chills run down my arms. Dad had prepared for this possibility, years before he passed away. David took a slow breath. I haven't opened it yet. I wanted your mother to be present. I looked toward the living room where Mom was quietly drinking her morning coffee. Dad still has one final message for us, David answered softly. And I have a feeling it's about to change everything. The drive to David Lawson's office was unusually quiet. Mom sat beside me, holding Dad's old wedding ring in her hands. She had taken it from the small wooden box on her bedside table before we left. She rubbed it gently with her thumb the entire way. Neither of us spoke. Some moments don't need words. When we arrived, David was already waiting. Ryan stood near the window. He looked exhausted. His clothes were wrinkled. His eyes were red from a sleepless night. For the first time in years, he didn't look like the confident older brother I had grown up with. He looked like a man who finally understood the consequences of his choices. David waited until everyone was seated. Then he placed a large cream-colored envelope on the table. The handwriting on the front immediately caught my attention. It was Dad's. There was no doubt about it. Across the front he had written, "To my family, open only if someone ever tries to take our home away from Margaret." Mom covered her mouth. "Oh, Thomas." David carefully broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, several pages long. He looked around the room. "I'll read it exactly as your father wrote it." The room became completely silent. David began reading. "My dearest Margaret, Ryan, and Emily, if you're hearing this letter, then something has happened that I prayed would never happen. It means someone has tried to separate our family from the home we built together. If that's true, I want each of you to remember one thing. This house was never my greatest achievement. Mom lowered her head. David continued. Margaret, you were. A tear rolled down Mom's cheek. Every wall I built, every room I painted, every nail I hammered. I built them because I wanted you and our children to always have a place where love lived. David paused for a moment before continuing. Ryan. Ryan slowly lifted his head. You've always carried the weight of believing you had to solve every problem alone. That strength will become your weakness if pride ever keeps you from asking for help. Ryan began crying silently. David continued reading. Emily, you've always been the one who protects people, even when they don't deserve it. Never lose that kindness. But remember, forgiveness should never require accepting dishonesty. I felt tears running down my face. Dad knew us better than anyone, even years after writing this letter. Every sentence felt as though he had written it yesterday. Then David reached the final page. His expression changed. There is one last instruction. He cleared his throat and continued. David, if you're the one reading this, then I ask one final favor. Please open the small cedar box in my office. Everyone looked at David. He stood without saying a word. Walking to the bookshelf, he reached behind several old legal binders and pulled out a small cedar box covered in dust. He looked surprised. I completely forgot about this. The key was still taped beneath the lid exactly where Dad had instructed. David unlocked the box. Inside were 3 items: the original handwritten restriction Dad had signed, a flash drive, and a folded document. David picked up the document first. His eyes widened. This changes everything. What is it? I asked. It's an updated property deed. He handed it to me. I quickly read the first page. 5 years earlier, Dad had quietly transferred the home into a family protection trust. The trust clearly stated that while Mom was alive, no single family member could sell, mortgage, or transfer the property without Margaret Carter's written approval, the trustee's approval, and confirmation from the family attorney. Ryan had none of those approvals. The sale had violated the trust from the very beginning. David smiled for the first time in days. The court won't just stop the sale. It will declare it legally void. Ryan buried his face in his hands. I never knew. David looked at him firmly. You never asked. You assumed. And assumptions destroyed your life. Then David picked up the flash drive. What is that? Mom asked. I honestly don't know. He plugged it into his computer. A video appeared on the screen. Dad smiled at us from his workshop. It was obvious he had recorded it shortly after writing the letter. Well, if you're watching this, I guess I was right to worry. He laughed softly. I know my children. You both have stubborn hearts. Ryan looked away. Dad continued. If money ever comes between you, money has already won. But family doesn't have to lose. He smiled warmly. Ryan, if you've made a mistake, tell the truth. Don't let one bad decision become a lifetime of regret. Then he looked directly into the camera. Emily, if you're standing here protecting your mother, thank you. I always knew you would. Mom couldn't hold back her tears anymore. Neither could I. Even Ryan sobbed quietly. Dad's final words filled the room. Home isn't the wood. It isn't the walls. It isn't even the land. Home is the people who choose each other every single day. So choose each other. And if you can't, at least choose honesty. The video ended. No one moved. Several minutes passed before Ryan finally stood. He walked over to Mom, then slowly dropped to his knees. I'm sorry. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I betrayed Dad. I betrayed you. I betrayed Emily. I thought fixing my financial problems mattered more than telling the truth. I was wrong. Mom looked at him for a long time. Finally, she spoke. You'll always be my son. But trust has to be earned again. Ryan nodded through tears. I know. I'll spend the rest of my life earning it. 3 months later, the court officially canceled the sale. The investment company recovered its money from Ryan's insurance and business assets. The bank strengthened its verification procedures after discovering how the forged documents had slipped through. Sarah Mitchell later called to tell me that every employee had received additional training because of our case. Ryan declared bankruptcy. He sold nearly everything he owned to repay his debts honestly. It took time, years in fact, but he stopped hiding. He stopped lying. He accepted responsibility. Mom never left the house. Every morning she still sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. Sometimes she smiled at Dad's 2 oak trees swaying in the breeze. I eventually moved closer so I could visit her almost every day. Together we restored Dad's old workshop. We turned it into a community woodworking space where teenagers could learn the craft he loved. Above the entrance, we hung a wooden sign carved from the last piece of lumber Dad had saved. It read, "A home built with love can survive any storm if the people inside choose truth over greed." Every time I unlocked that workshop door, I remembered the phone call that almost changed our lives forever. The strange thing is, I used to think that call was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. Now I see it differently. Because if Sarah Mitchell hadn't listened to her instincts, if one bank employee hadn't asked one extra question, if one forgotten document hadn't been preserved, my father's home would have disappeared forever. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with loud speeches or dramatic revenge. Sometimes it begins with one honest person refusing to ignore something that doesn't feel right. And that's exactly what saved our family.